You're listening to the Wedding Biz Network, the voice of the creative entrepreneur. Hey everyone, it's Andy Kushner, host of The Wedding Biz, in which I conduct in-depth and revealing interviews of icons and those who I feel are the next generation icons of the weddings and event industry. And all of this is to provide you with education and inspiration. And speaking of that, before I introduce today's special guest, I want to mention that The Wedding Biz has been my passion project for almost 4 years now. I can't believe it. And I've just been so driven to support this industry in any way that I can and to help your growth in it by bringing you these insights from our industry leaders. And the response has really been amazing. I'm just so grateful. However, those opportunities do come at a financial cost. And the best way for me to keep maximizing the potential of the show and to avoid charging a membership fee is to ask you to become a patron. If you value the show and its content, you can go to theweddingbiz.com and click on the patron link to sign up for as little as $6 a month or more if you feel so inclined. Again, that's theweddingbiz.com. And not only will you be supporting the show, but you'll also be securing your access to solid, exclusive future content. So thank you. So if you missed last week's episode, it was with Josh Spiegel with Birch Event Design out of New York City. Josh has been working just a crazy amount during the pandemic, and we talk all about how he has been able to do that. And also I get his whole backstory, very interesting. And so today's guest is Eric McVey. Eric is a wedding, portrait, and editorial film photographer with a love for medium format cameras, natural light, and incredible scenery. Eric's approach combines documentary and fine art styles. Named by Harper's Bazaar, Brides, and Martha Stewart Weddings as one of the best wedding photographers in the world, and twice selected as Film Photographer of the Year, Eric's work has been featured in top wedding publications. I had an absolute blast talking with Eric about a variety of topics, and he didn't hold back at all. So enjoy my conversation with Eric McVey. Eric, hey, are you calling in from Oregon? Is that where you're from?
I'm calling in from Oregon.
What part? Portland?
Actually, Salem. It's where I grew up. It's an hour south of Portland. It's the capital. And most people, when I tell them Salem, they think it's the witch trials, but it's,
right.
It's far less interesting.
Yeah, but you got the beauty of the environment there. I mean, my God, I've been around that area. I love it.
We do. I think Oregon tends to breed a lot of photographers because of the natural beauty. And that's probably part of, what motivated me to be a photographer, having the beach, an hour away, living kind of in the forest, having rivers and lakes everywhere and mountains a couple hours away. It's you just can't miss, you walk out the door and everything's pretty.
But, I could swear that I read somewhere that what actually got you into photography during college was when your mother lined you up for an interview to photograph an ad campaign. Is that true? Is that real?
I've told the story many times, but it really never gets old. It's a funny one because code or video, I wasn't super connected with, so I was a little bit lost. And I grew up having no interest in photography whatsoever. And I was going to school at University of Oregon in my fourth year studying digital arts, which definitely, has many links to photography. And Pamela McVey, ex-Marine, go-getter, hardcore, badass. My mom, called me up and said that someone who used to work for her company it was a brand manager at a new company and looking for a photographer to shoot their, an ad campaign that they were doing. And she said, oh, yeah, Eric, she had asked my mom if Eric's a photographer, and she told her yes.
That's crazy.
And so my mom called me up and told me I was going to interview for this, and I had no interest. And, I kind of thought, I'm going to fall flat on my face. This is going to be an embarrassment. The interview's in a couple weeks. I don't have a camera. I don't know how to use one. And she said, your dad and I will buy you a camera for Christmas. And then, your friend, Steven, he's my best friend growing up. And his family owns the premier film processing lab, really one of the top 3 in the world and top couple in the country, is my best friend and who I actually even lived with at the time. So he was a photographer, and, my mom and dad got me the camera. He showed me how to use it. I just, basic settings, knew the basic fundamentals, how to fake my way through it, and went and did the test shoot interview for the company. And they hired me to shoot for them for a whole summer, traveling all over the country.
Jeez.
It was a retirement home company. So they had locations everywhere, hundreds and hundreds all over the country. So I would take these 10, 14-day trips around the country shooting at these different locations. And, it was my first delve into photography whatsoever.
That's crazy.
The crazier part of this is not that, my career stemmed and grew from this experience, but that the gal that they paired me up with on the project is now my wife.
Oh, come on. That's funny.
So they paired the two of us up. She was in PR and marketing, running the project that I was shooting. And so it was like a perma date, traveling, on airplanes and restaurants and movies and, at work all day together for like 14 days at a time. And we were either going to love or hate each other by the end of it. And it's kind of history.
That's really funny. But you must have had a real intuitive sense. I mean, to photograph an ad campaign, to understand the branding or whatever level that you did at that time. I mean, again, it had to be some kind of natural ability.
Let's not overstate, the term, quote unquote, and I'm using quotes, ad campaign. It was. Okay. And they're the biggest retirement home corporation in the world, I think, at the time. But their standards were clearly compromised. I had no business whatsoever shooting that, and making whatever what I considered crazy money, $500 a day or whatever at the time.
Jeez, wow!
I had no business being there, but I think maybe the takeaway from it is that they liked me as a person, and this gal that hired me, I had actually worked with her side by side at my parents' picture framing stores back, when I was growing up as a teenager, as my first job. So I think a lot of it came from the fact that she just liked me, and the photography might have been secondary, and it was just a little bit of the right place at the right time, and fake it till you make it. And that's, I think, a lot of why it worked out. But, I look back at the work and it's not great. It could have been a lot better. But I wouldn't, I'd never do it differently if I had to do it over. People do tell me, in my family that they saw that potential in me, but I don't think I did for a long time.
Well, then when did you? Like at the end of this, did you, I guess, kind of fall in love with photography and want to continue? I'm assuming that's how it went.
I would say not yet. I think my parents were still a big influence. They converted their sort of motorhome bay in their house into a studio for me. I told them not to. I said, I was like, don't, I don't know if this is my thing. I was ready to take a 9-to-5 job still because it was security, and I knew I could, make a paycheck from it, and it was a guarantee. But at this point, living in Salem, Oregon, trying to be a commercial photographer.
Right. Yeah. Where are you going to go?
It just wasn't really working out. I would shoot real estate listings. I would shoot headshots. I would try to drum up business with sort of business group friends of my parents and kind of grassroots build it up from there. But that was a couple gigs a week if I was lucky. And I was still really, really exploring and figuring myself out. And it wasn't until I shot, my first wedding, which again, I was kind of forced into, kicking and screaming probably. It was a family friend, and, they offered to pay me $500, and it was actually took place at a commune, like hot spring nudist colony. Yeah.
Come on.
Thankfully, the couple and the guests were not nude.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of scampering nudes, running around the background and bathing in the hot springs. And there was a moment where I was shooting the couple on a bridge over a river, and a naked man came scampering down the rocks behind us and started soaping up and cleansed himself in the river. And, I think back to that, and my whole family, was there to actually assist me on the job. They were carrying around big lights. Like my mom was telling the people how to pose. I had no idea how to direct people or interact with people, or really I didn't even have my head wrapped around the technical part of photography at that point. But it paid better than any job that I'd had, even though it was my first gig and a relative low pay for in terms of wedding photography. But, people found out that I shot that and started asking me to do senior photos and family photos. And it grew from there. And I really hated working with people at first because I like people, but it was hard. It's really hard to try to learn photography and lighting and technique, and also try to learn how to direct people and interact with people all at the same time.
Well, and especially at such a young age, too.
Yeah, I mean, relatively. I mean, at 22, 23, I should have had it together a little. I have no excuses. I'm an adult at that point, but I'm not going to deny that my mom or girlfriend came along with me for like to photograph senior pictures just so they could help me pose people and, give me some confidence because I didn't have it yet. And it wasn't until I got a handful of weddings and, 10, 20 senior photo sessions under my belt that I started to actually love it, because I started to feel like I was good at it. And that's really what it took, is feeling confident that I was doing a good job and that I knew what I was doing.
Well, I want to start asking you about some aspects of your style. Now, for me, the layman, I maybe photographers listening would understand exactly what this means, but I know that your approach combines documentary and fine art style. What does that mean?
Well, to me, what it means is fine art is a very broad term and it gets thrown around a lot. And to be honest, I don't even know the definition, even though I use it. Okay. I don't know the definition in the sense of how I use it, but here's how I'll kind of describe it in my own work. The fine art part is the really refined portion, the curated portion, where all of these elements are coming together. The use of the film that I'm shooting, the lighting, the attention to detail, just the training of 10 years of shooting film and being a photographer. All of that coming together to make this to get this very specific look in images, and to get everything as right as possible. So I think that encompasses the posing and the light and the setting. It's bringing all of these elements together in a very perfected way. And I think juxtaposed with that is a more documentary storytelling, editorial type of photography.
Okay.
And I think that is more, the real moments that only happen once, the movement, the feeling. I don't want to lose those elements of photography, that visceral feeling, the emotive, the emotion that you get from looking at an image, because it is too, it's too perfect, or it's too thought out. The fine art part is the really thought out part.
Right.
And I think that the other half are those fleeting moments, the ability to know when they're coming, to be able to capture them when they happen, because they do only happen once, but also putting yourself and your clients in a position to capture those moments, on a consistent basis, because you can't just sort of sit around and hope that it's going to happen every wedding or every engagement shoot or every editorial shoot. It does have to be planned out, and you do have to be experienced in order to capture those things. But I think it's a different skill set, and I really pride myself on delivering this. If you see one of my full wedding galleries, which I encourage my clients to look at, it's really the number one thing that I tell couples that I talk to, regardless of whether they book me or not. I tell them to look at full wedding galleries from photographers, because that's going to give you the best sense of how they capture an entire wedding day. Anybody can put together this incredible highlight highlight reel of images in the form of an Instagram grid or a website slideshow. But I think what's much harder is to deliver consistency and variety in a 1,200 image gallery where, you go from image to image and everything is bringing something to the table. You're not seeing steep drop off in quality from image to image or from a certain portion of the wedding to a different portion of the wedding. And, everything doesn't look the same. It's not all the same. It's not all the same crop. It's not all the same expression. It's not all the same feeling, you get from each image. It's all of it. And, what I strive to do for every couple I shoot is to deliver that variety and quality and consistency throughout and give them those real moments as well as those really, really thought out fine art moments.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, I understand there's certain moments that are going to be a given in terms of being, just loaded with emotion. But you said in terms of when you are putting them in a position to have a moment, can you give an example of some of your favorite, like how you go about doing that?
Sure. Well, in a broad sense, I'll try to think of something specific, but in a broad sense, a lot of it comes down to preparation and having so many basically, I want to have as many variables nailed down ahead of time,
right?
Before I'm even shooting, so that I can control the variables that I can't completely plan for in the moment when they're happening. So I want to have like an amazing photography timeline going into the wedding day. I want to have scouted everything and decided where I'm going to shoot the different portions of the day. And then I want to have a rapport with the couple that, makes them feel comfortable around me and makes them trust me so that they do let their guard down. So what's really important to me, and, I talk about it a lot to couples when they interview me, when they're considering photographers, is I have my go-to set of poses and stuff like that I'm comfortable with, and I'm gonna, in a bind, I'm never gonna be stammering and clamoring and not know what to do in that moment, just from experience and from repetition. But it's not to the point that it's crippling. It's not to the point that it's formulaic. I'm experienced enough that, I know how to pose people and make them feel comfortable and talk them through these poses. But to also, I want to let moments present themselves. I want to be open artistically to looking for those little interactions between the couple, looking for, being present in the moment, looking for the way the light is hitting, someone's face or hair at that moment. I don't want to put myself in such a box where, I do this every time and it always works for me. No, you're going to look through, my different client galleries and you're going to see those consistent threads throughout each one. You're going to know it's my work, but you're also going to see something, different and special and very unique to that wedding and client in each one. And I think that comes from, again, being so prepared in every way that I can be prepared, so that those variables, again, that I cannot prepare for completely, that I have the capacity in my head to roll with it and to address them as they come and make the best artistic, and technical decisions in that moment. And having that headspace is so important as a photographer who's trying to marry, so many things together with the art and the ability to communicate with the client and the technical portion and the business part. There's so much going on. And, I never want to lose the artist part of what I do.
Yeah. And I see that it's so apparent. Like I'm looking at, for example, in your portfolio, Claudia and Alex in Atlanta, Georgia. I mean, just randomly pick that, looking at it right now. And I can see the art. And I can imagine, now that you're telling me this, I can imagine you being there and saying, whoa, look how the light is hitting the building, the architecture. And let me grab this and bring them over here. And I get that. It's so apparent when you look at this.
That's great. That's great. I appreciate that, and that's something that's really important for me for people to see. And I think that can be lost, especially like later years as a wedding photographer. You can lose your zest for creating unique imagery and delivering the best possible images and galleries for your clients, because it just kind of it gets old. You can get worn down, just like any career. And the thing about being an accountant and being tired of what you do is it's numbers. You can still be worn down, but you can still get it right. And you don't have to probably push yourself mentally to have a headspace to create new things all the time. But as a photographer, if you lose that zest and that artistry, it's going to show. And there's no way around it. So a lot of what I do, a lot of the way that I set up my business and my approach to photography is with the end goal of being able to do this for a long time. I don't want to shoot too much. I don't want to take on clients or events that don't speak to me, or that I know could clash with that. The clients and I could clash in any way, or that I might not be able to be as creative as I need to be to make sure that they're happy, or they're looking for something different. It's just very important to me to maintain that artistry part of things. Even if my business blew up and I was doing double the business, but shooting everything in ballrooms, which is great and it pays the bills, and you can still be creative in any setting. I think it would be doing a disservice to myself and my clients, and I wouldn't be able to do this job for as long as I know I can, at this pace, and with as much as I love it. And the fact that every time I go out and shoot, I love what I do, which is, I think can be rare at even at age 35 after doing it for 10 years. It can be rare. I think it gets lost a lot. And a lot of people go into photography because it's their passion and it's what they love. And it stems from a passion for the art. And then that gets lost when the business and the repetition kind of kills the soul of the artistry. And I want to do this for a while.
Yeah. Well, I think this is something, all of us struggle with in our own respective genre of the business. I want to be sure you know the wonderful news of our latest show, Stop and Smell the Roses, with acclaimed lifestyle and event design expert Preston Bailey. Not only will he share the secrets, tools, and technologies behind his extraordinary ability to create a theatrical environment out of any space, you will also discover more about the man behind the magic. Preston will reveal how his focus on personal growth has been the root of his professional success, and you'll have the opportunity for him to answer your questions along the way. Plus, Preston will be inviting onto the show many of the star celebrities he has worked with in the past, so you don't want to miss a single episode. We also have another great show on the Wedding Biz Network, The Business of Being Creative, with host Sean Lowe. Since debuting last May, his show has really taken off, and he's continuing to bring you the creative business advice he's shared with accomplished industry notables. Be sure to take advantage of Sean's talkback opportunity by recording questions and comments from right there in each episode's show notes. So, if you are a creative who is turning your craft into a business or want to take it to another level, head to theweddingbiznetwork.com and take a listen to Stop and Smell the Roses with Preston Bailey and The Business of Being Creative with Sean Lowe. That's theweddingbiznetwork.com. I want to also ask you about, obviously, you've chosen film over digital. Was that from the very beginning, or how do you feel about that now?
No, it was not from the beginning. When I started photography, it was like 2009, and film was all but dead at that point. It'd been on a slow decline since about 2000. When I picked up a camera, I'd never considered film. I forgot that it existed. I was in the era of digital, and I shot for 2 years on digitally. And what's so interesting is I already felt, whether or not it was merited, looking back, it definitely wasn't. But I already felt like I was hitting a bit of a wall artistically. I felt like I'd taken my work to a certain point and I wasn't sure how to improve it or make it better. And again, I laugh at myself thinking that because it's so absurd after shooting for only 2 years. But I think that the bigger part of that, the bigger reason that I felt that way is because I started to see film images pop up here and there. And my wife and I got engaged in 2010, and we started looking at photographers. And, at that point, photographers didn't really travel around like they do now. We just looked in Oregon and the Northwest. And there was one photographer whose images, there were just a couple images that I could not stop looking at. And his name was Kirk Maston. He's now, you may have heard of him. He's the Maston Labs preset guy.
Okay.
He does film emulation presets to make digital photos look like film. But back then, he was the only photographer in the Northwest who was shooting any film. And, I didn't even know that was why I liked the work. But after talking to him and booking him, and after him shooting the wedding and getting the images back, all of the images that we loved were shot on film. And for me, that was it. He had only shot 5 rolls of film, which equates to 80 film images out of the hundreds.
Huh.
And it was so glaringly obvious that that's what I wanted my work to look like. And I would not be happy and fulfilled until it looked that way. I knew what I had to do. So I immediately reached out to Jose Villa because, his work kept popping up everywhere on, Style Me Pretty was the big thing back in the day. And he'd have weddings on there all the time. And he had a book out that was about shooting film. And I read the book. And, immediately when I got back from my honeymoon where I read the book, I reached out to Jose and asked him if he had room at his workshop and if I could book a session, a 1-year anniversary session for my wife and I.
Yeah, cool.
He said, "You know what? If you sign up for the workshop, I'll shoot the session for you."
Whoa.
At no charge. And I was just amazed by the generosity. I signed up for the workshop that day, bought, the film camera that he shoots on, of course, that right then. And that camera showed up a couple weeks before the workshop. I only took the film camera to the workshop because I knew I would fall back on what was comfortable if I had the option of shooting digitally. And really, I just learned as much as I could in the 4 days from the best minds in the industry and the best wedding photographer out there. And, having him as that sort of guiding light and mentor from the get-go just allowed me to skip a lot of the mistakes and growing pains that anybody who's growing a business or trying something new might have to go through, because all of the questions and the tough moments and the mystery behind it melted away. Just being able to have him there and ask those questions and be around people who knew about it. And it kind of springboarded from there. So film, just to round this out, the reasons I love it, first of all, the look is what brought me in. I think, digital is getting better right now, but it wasn't back then. And it's starting to do things a lot closer to what film can do right now, which is really encouraging and fun. But the look of film still, you just can't get it anywhere else. And you really know it when you see it.
Oh yeah. Like looking at your work, it's obvious to me, and I'm not a pro. It's obvious. Yeah.
Cool. And so the look, as well as the pace and the.
What do you mean by that? By pace?
The shooting pace.
Oh, right. It's slower. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the procedure in shooting film is so different from shooting digital. Where when I'm shooting digital, you hear it over and over. You hear the spray and pray method, and what I just tend to shoot through the uncomfortable moments until you catch something good. And I don't want to be too pejorative and put digital in a box like that, because it's not what everybody who shoots. Not everybody who shoots digitally shoots that way, but that's what it does to me. And I like the way that I shoot when I shoot film. I like the way that I shoot a lot better because I slow down. I'm paying attention to, again, the subject and the surroundings and the light rather than shooting through the uncomfortable moment.
Yeah. It's more intentional.
Exactly. That's definitely the word I'm looking for. It's far more intentional. I shoot it far more intentionally instead of taking myself out of the moment, looking at the back of the screen. I can really live in the camera rather than, because I do think shooting digital can be a disruptive process, because when you're going from reality back to the screen, reviewing the work, it disrupts your mindset, and you're not able to flow as an artist as much as you are when you're totally in it. And, people ask, well, how do you know what the images are going to look like when you're shooting on film? And really, it just comes down to shooting a ton of it and seeing the results. And you just, you after a couple of years, and you don't have to worry about that part. You don't have to question it. And I think that's huge, because as humans, we only have so much headspace to go around.
Yeah.
And when we're discounting ourselves, when we're spreading ourselves too thin and thinking about too many things at once, I think that the more important factors can suffer. And I think that, I became a better photographer when I started shooting film.
How do you think about framing and composition, those two elements?
I think so much of it is natural. That's probably a terrible answer, because I think, if you're a newer photographer and looking for guidance on that front, it is hard. It's hard to hear that, because I think oftentimes it comes down to you either have it or you don't. As much as I hate to say it, I think it's something that's ingrained, and I don't really think about it that much. It's funny. I try to be unique and deliver a variety of imagery and push myself to look at different compositions and angles and different ways to tell a story by creating, a window into that moment, if that makes sense. Layers, looking through layers into those moments on a wedding day. How can I use all these elements to create a feeling? If I'm shooting in a house with someone, with a bride getting ready, or her mom helping her get into the dress, how can I use different walls or mirrors or, veils to create different compositions and tell more of a story using composition? But I do think I'm not like a big mathematical rule of thirds type photographer where I'm, really technically sorting things out when it comes to composition.
And I want to talk about light also. Like I know in some interview that I read that you did, you said that film doesn't react the same way that a digital sensor reacts to light. And you talk about, your love for natural light, in addition to great scenery, and obviously how we see color. Can you say more about light, about that?
Definitely. Well, light's a photographer's best friend. And like when I talk about the growing pains of my younger years, taking people out for senior photos and shooting at weddings and stuff, the biggest part of it was not knowing how to harness that natural light and use it to my advantage. So going back to your question about, so how digital and film can react differently to light. I think, when you switch from shooting digitally to film, there's a learning curve in terms of how you use, and I'm sure you're familiar with the term backlighting and side lighting. Mm-hmm. On film, I think, when you're backlighting a subject, that sort of glow or lens flare can, at least on the camera with the lens that I shoot, it can kind of magnify itself. And when light kind of blows out the frame, it shifts the colors and the contrast throughout the frame. So you're talking about very, very minute tweaks to angles, of your camera or of the subject to lock in that perfect light. And shooting digitally, you get that immediate feedback, which is great. You can see, if I shot at this angle, now I look at the back of the camera and this was how much flair I got. And this is what the subject looks like. This is what their skin looks like. This is what their clothes look like. This is what the color looks like. And, on film, it is a little bit more up in the air. And it is all about that repetition of getting out there and exposing yourself as a photographer to all of the different scenarios that can happen, so that when you get into a scenario, you recognize, you're like, oh, I've seen this 10 times. I've seen this 20 times. I know exactly how the image is going to come out, when I get the film scan back, because I have to trust my instincts and my history as a photographer to tell me, that the image is going to look a certain way and look good, because I don't have that feedback. But utilizing light is probably the most fun aspect of being a photographer, and the way that maybe even distinguishes photographers the most from one another, in the way, the lighting scenarios that they're drawn to, the way that they use light, all those things. I think, a lot of people, especially like upcoming film shooters, want to try to replicate a formula. They want to shoot a camera and a film stock and rate the film, quote unquote. If you're a photographer, you know what I'm saying, or overexpose the film a certain amount and have it scanned on a certain scanner. And they think that, if they do all those things, their work is going to look just like this photographer that they want to emulate. And that is anything but the case, because every photographer has their own perspective. Every photographer is doing a set of things that nobody else knows they're doing. Nobody else can really understand the inner workings of that photographer's brain, and the way that they're looking at light and harnessing light is a huge part of that. So like a mistake that I made early on was, I remember, I was doing a shoot for like a bridal veil designer, and it was on a white backdrop, and the queen of like studio photography at that point in the wedding world was Elizabeth Messina. She just killed it with, especially female subjects in a studio setting. It was like, how can if my work could look like this, I will die happy. And I shot the photos, and I remember sitting in Lightroom in my editing software, doing side by side with her work and my work, and trying to edit those images to look like hers. And it was so disappointing, because it was just so far off the mark, and there was no way that they were ever going to look like hers, because I don't know there are so many factors that go into creating that image. It's not as simple as I do these 5 things and my work's going to look just as good. I mean, all the way down to the way that she interacts with her subjects, which I know she's known for and probably does like nobody else, and something that I cannot do like her. But the comparison, was the death of my creativity, and it was totally unproductive, totally and completely unproductive, and really the opposite. It was detrimental, because I was never going to be happy with my own work when I was comparing it to someone else's. The only way I was going to be happy with my own work is if I compared it to my previous work and tried to improve on that and use my own perspective to create something unique.
Wow, really interesting. Is there anything that like what still challenges you, Eric, on generally speaking, that causes as anxiety for you? What do you still have to deal with that's difficult?
COVID-19. No, I'm just kidding. We don't need to get into that stuff. But I would say there's a misconception that after you've shot weddings for, 10 plus years, that you've got it all figured out. And the fact is, I show up on a wedding day and I have butterflies, just like anybody else does, just like I did in my first year of shooting weddings. And, I think that that's a good thing. I still feel this great weight, bearing down on me to make the client happy and deliver something unique and beautiful and that they're going to love. And, it's their one shot at wedding photos, and they put this trust in me. And I wonder every time I go out, am I going to be the artist that I know I can be today? Because it's not a given at all. I might not deliver. And there are so many factors. I might not feel great that day. My head might be in a different place. And that feeling tends to melt away within the first few minutes of, arriving on a wedding day and starting to shoot and feeling that artistic energy, the creative energy that you have as a photographer. And I love the fact that I get to be that this gets to be my job, and it's not just zeros and ones. That it's totally interpretive, and I can take it. It's completely open ended, and I can take a wedding day in any number of directions for those 10 hours that I'm kind of, for lack of a better term, in charge. And that's exciting, but terrifying.
Yeah.
But I think it keeps me going, and it keeps me motivated to keep pushing myself, and it keeps me on my toes, because I cannot let my guard down or be too comfortable, because a client being unhappy with the work that I create for them is more or less, one of my worst fears. And I try to go so above and beyond and work my ass off on a wedding day to the point that I know that that's not going to be a possibility. I want to do everything in my power to ensure that that's not a possibility. And, for that reason, I tend to have very happy clients. And I've been lucky in that respect because the fear is driving me, Andy.
Right. Well,
no, it's not a crippling fear, but it's always there.
Well, it's healthy. Look, you talk a lot earlier about Jose Villa. He's been on the show a few times, and he talks about that too. He feels it every job at the beginning, and I, in my music business, same thing. I think I agree with you that essentially it really is a good thing. It puts me into a certain zone, and it does start to melt away over time. But being like that helps me be kind of hyper vigilant in the beginning. I think it's really important.
Absolutely. I think anybody who's good at what they do probably feels that to a certain extent. If you stop feeling that, I think there's something wrong.
Well, and also, like you said, challenging yourself, wanting to challenge yourself and take risk, and there's anxiety that comes with that. And so I think it's a good balance. Well, before we wrap up, I also want to learn more about the workshops that you do and speaking engagements. I know you've got a pretty extensive workshop. You want to say a little something about that?
Sure. We used to do in-person workshops, my wife and I haven't plugged her enough this show. She's probably 80% of the reason that I've been successful in any way, shape, or form. So because we teamed up really in our first year of marriage. So 10 years ago, she quit her corporate job in PR and marketing and came on to really spearhead the marketing portion of what I do, and making sure that people found out about me, and taking, working smart, not hard is, a term she uses a lot. So really pinpointing, road mapping where we wanted to go, and then making a list of steps and phases as to how we would get there. So, I mention that only to say, Amy and I, we used to do these in-person workshops, and then a few years ago, we knew we were going to have a kiddo. So, and they require so much time to put on.
Oh yeah.
And put on. Yeah. It sounds like, they require, in order to pull off in a way that honors your attendees' investment, and again, that crippling fear of someone being unhappy after paying us money is what drove us to put on, what I would call, really, really good workshops. But we knew we couldn't do that once our family grew, because we just wouldn't have the time. And so we wrote we spent a year, the two of us, writing an online photography course it's 700-800 pages, and this is behind the scenes videos and galleries and a lot of really great stuff. We poured everything we knew about the business and photography and artistry and all of it, every aspect. We didn't want to leave any stones unturned. And we put it all into a course that we knew would just live online after that point, and we, wouldn't require much upkeep because we were going to be busier parents. And it's been great. We put it out 4 years ago, and A ton of people have bought it, and we've never had a bad review. And it's having been a young wedding photographer a few years ago, it's something that would have been really beneficial for me. And that's what I wanted to create, because there's just a ton of wedding photographers in general, but a lot of photographers who are interested in film, and it's growing every day. And it's something that's been a benefit to a lot of people.
That's great. And just for the photographers who are listening, what is the latest equipment that you're using?
Oh, sure. So I shoot all of my film on a Contax 645 medium format camera, and my preferred film is Fuji 400H. And my digital setup is the Fuji GFX. I'm blanking on the model number, but everybody will know the GFX. And I actually shoot it with an adapter and the Contax lenses.
Okay. Well, great. Well, Eric, this has been really fun, getting to know you more and hearing your philosophy about all of this. Like I say, I love your work. It does grab me. And so it's been, I've been wanting to have you on the show. And so this has really been a blast. Thanks.
Thanks, Andy. I really enjoyed it too. I appreciate your conversational nature of your interviews. And yeah, it's been really fun talking to you. And again, I love what you do and appreciate you having me on. It's an honor.
Great, man. My pleasure. That's great. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Eric McVey. Be sure to check out his website, which is ericmcvey.com. That's ERICHMCVEY.com. And his Instagram handle is at Eric McVey. If you missed any of that, you can get it in our show notes at the website of theweddingbiz.com. And would really appreciate if you share this episode with your friends and colleagues so that they not only hear Eric's story, but also find out about the show. And finally, don't forget to listen to our follow-on segment that comes out with each interview on Wednesdays called The Next Level, in which I have a guest co-host, and together we tease out some of the highlights of the interview, helping to break them down into specific tactics and tips for you to use to raise your own business to the next level. And this week's guest co-host is going to be the esteemed planner, Lori Ahrens. That's right. Lori is going to be back on the show, so be sure to check in on Wednesday. And then next week, I'm going to be featuring lighting designer Ira Levy. So be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out on notifications of episodes that come out. And again, check out the website of theweddingbiz.com. Social media handle, especially on Instagram, is at theweddingbiz. And we'll catch you next week.